Right, hello and welcome. Thank you for registering for our webinar panel discussion hosted by market leader in building analytics software, CIM. Your chair for the next 60 minutes or so. My name is Jim McClelland. I'm founder and editor of SUSMEME, the magazine and the weekly bulletin. The focus for our webinar today is NABERS UK navigating the scheme for improved building performance. Take us through the topic. We have a wealth of built environment experience and a breadth of perspectives on our panel today, as you can see there. So by way of introductions, join me in welcoming Antonette Easwaranathan, Technical Officer at CIBSE Certification, Victoria Herring, Director Sustainability Programme at Grosvenor, Luke Cleary, Technical Director CSR Sustain, and David Walsh, Co-CEO and Founder at CIM. Our format for today, you see there, Antonette will kick us off with a few slides by way of introduction to NABERS. Then we'll get into a panel discussion, firstly about why NABERS is important and getting started. Then we'll look at enhancing operational efficiency and then move towards looking ahead, some final takeaways, and then a bit of extra Q&A, then the role of technology from David, a bit of a review at the end with a few extra slides plus live audience Q&A to close. Speaking of which, audience, you can find at the bottom of your screen, probably, you'll see there's in the chat there's links to panel bios and some more info about our host CIM. If you do have questions, obviously the Q&A button there you'll see. And if you keep typing them in throughout our session, we'll get to them both during the debate and in the final Q&A. And if there are more than we can cover in the hour, then we'll pick some up offline post-event too. Polls. You'll also see in the polls quizzes button, which I've just seen a thing pop up saying that's now live. There's one quick multi-choice poll. Be great if you could throw in your vote, and we'll unpack the results at the end of the session, at the end of the hour. So the whole session, as you will realize, is live, and of course it's recorded. So once the webinar concludes, kindly take a moment to complete the very short feedback survey. It's super helpful for our organisers, and keep an eye out for the link to recording arriving in your email inbox. Right then, that's enough from me. It's now a case of let the show begin. So to kick us off, Antonette is going to set the scene with some opening insights, some conversation starters, NABERS UK, an intro and update on post-launch progress. So Antonette, it's over to you, please. Just get the slides up for you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, CIM, for the opportunity for us to participate in this webinar. I'm Antonette Easwaranathan. I'm a technical officer and NABERS UK lead at CIBSE Certification. I'm here to introduce you to the NABERS UK scheme and the progress we made so far. NABERS UK was launched in UK back in 2021 by BRE. And then CIBSE Certification took over the scheme last year as administrator.
Antonette, I don't know if you can pop your slides into slideshow. Is that, should be at the top. I think there should be a thing to click them into slideshow. Not to worry if you can't.
I couldn't see it on my side.
Not to worry. We'll manage as we are then, no worries. We can see them anyway, I think. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that. And as you all know, it is a tool, NABERS UK is a tool to measure operational building performance on a rating scale from 1 to 6 stars. At the moment in UK, we only have commercial office buildings are measured under energy intensity. Although it's all about better performing buildings, how we look at is via through 2 products here in UK. The first one is being designed for performance. In Australia, it is called commitment agreement. This is applicable for only new and major refurbishment buildings. And the second one energy for offices, this is applicable for all existing buildings. What is design for performance? In early stages of a building design, the developer or building owner, by registering the project under NABERS UK DFP scheme, they are making a commitment to the public that they are going to design and build the building to the highest possible operational energy standards. It is a legal agreement which requires the project to have minimum 4 stars target rating. The agreement sets procedures for the building owner to follow through. Once the building being built and operational, they have to assess the actual energy consumption and have to lodge the assessment to complete the agreement. At the agreement stage, once the registration is completed, the building is added to the live building register at CIBSE website. At the moment, there are around 170 buildings added. 20 are in the process to join. If you go onto CIBSE website, under building register, within assessment type, if you select target rating, you can view all the buildings with their targets and area and with their location added to the register. So on the next stage of the design for performance is the design review target rating. Once the agreement stage is completed, the design team creates a simulation model to estimate the future operational energy performance of the building, which will be reviewed by independent design review panelists who are expert on this NABERS UK scheme, who will make sure the design includes all the elements for the building to achieve its target rating. At that stage, we will review the report and issue the design for performance certificate to the project. Out of 170 registered projects, 65 are certified as design reviewed. The same way within the building register, if you select design review target rating, you can view all the buildings that achieved design review target rating. Once the building is built and operational, and they have 12 months data, energy data, the third-party license assessor, not someone who already participated within this design and building construction. It has to be a third-party license assessor who will assess the actual performance and lodge the data, and we will audit it and then certify the project. At that stage, the design for performance agreement completes, and the project will move to certified performance stage. The same assessment methodology is what used for existing buildings as well, because they are already operational and they have 12 months energy consumption data. Based on their data, it will be assessed to give them a rating between 1 to 6 stars. As you can see, in Australia, this Energy for Offices is the famous scheme, but in UK, somehow it's the design for performance was picked up sooner by the developers, and we don't have, we have existing buildings ratings, but so far only 25 assessment completed and 12 ratings are live. That's because some are kept private and some are expired. Between this design for performance and this existing building ratings, the only difference is in UK, we allow the existing buildings to have private rating, especially because most of the time in existing buildings, the first rating could be lower. And although this is going to be the baseline rating for the building, keeping it private helps the building owner to work on the background and for the first few years. And once the building is improved to a certain level, and if they are happy, they can go with public on their rating. Although the DFP scheme is working very well in UK, in my opinion, I would say the existing building scheme is the most beneficial journey to a building. It can be seen as an engine that can take all the existing buildings to a better performing standard, step by step, one at a time. This starts from a single step, measuring the performance. This helps the building owner to understand whether the meterings are working, BMS controls working, or whether they have to add more controls to their existing BMS, etc. And by measuring, analyzing the data, they can see where their operational standards are, where they have to intervene to further improvement. That's the benefit I see that the scheme brings to the existing buildings. And because we don't have any case studies in UK, it's still early stages, that I have borrowed 2 slides from our Australian team to share today. So this one shows that how early leaders, people who use the neighbor scheme at the beginning, benefited most. And you can see that at least they used the scheme for around 7 to 8 years to bring their energy intensity from 600 to near 300 or 350. While compared to when people joined, when the disclosure introduced in Australia or expanded, that's the pink one, people who benefited most are the ones who joined the scheme at early stages. That's what this shows. And on this next slides, that who and the leaders who improve, and those leaders improvements in neighbors rating are being rewarded by the market. As you can see, from mid to lower rating, compared to mid to lower rating, the higher rated buildings have longer leases and lower vacancy, and also their value was higher than the other buildings. I'm nearly at the end. Now I can introduce you to our first building that last month it has completed its design for performance rating, and it's in Leeds, 11 to 12 Wellington Place. This is the first UK buildings to complete design for performance and to achieve its target rating 5-star. Now it is 5-star certified performance. It's achieved 5-star certified performance. This was registered back in 2021. One of the first few buildings to register, and it's a new build grade A commercial office development, and they have done a base building assessment and achieved 5 stars. As NABERS UK administrator, CIBSE certification along with our Australian NABERS team, we are very pleased with this outcome. Also the developer and the building management teams and the design team, everyone, they really worked as a team to get this building to achieve its target. From conversation with the team, that I can see after 1 year operation that now they understood better the building, and they still see where they can improve further, and hope in their next assessment next year they can achieve 5.5 star. And because they are very enthusiastic towards their success, and I would say maybe this the first building to achieve 6 stars in UK in the future. But they are continuously working on it.
Excellent.
And just one more slide, that While BRE was administered, the training was carried out by Australian team. Since CIBSE took over, we are doing the training, NABERS UK training as well. And at the moment, we have around 90 licensed assessors joined the scheme. The training is slightly different in operation to traditional other UK training programs. Anyone can apply to the training. You don't need any previous experience. It is programmed in a way that the assessors will become well knowledgeable on the rules and assessment methodologies, because we want to make sure in the future there will not be any complications on the delivery of the scheme, because the scheme depends on our assessors as well. Therefore, we are very strict on the program. Once they joined as licensed assessor, the first assessment will be supervised, and on their future assessments, if they need help, we are always here to help them to complete the assessment successfully. Thank you. I am now handing this back to Jim now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Antonette. So, yeah, really helpful intro there. I mean, design for performance, the clues in the name, as it were, target rating, certified performance. And I noted some keywords you used early on: commitment and also legal requirement. That's the weight of the thing, and also a good nod for existing buildings. So thank you very much, Antonette. So now then, for bringing the panel in. So to start now, we're going to look at why it's important and getting started, literally. So David, if I can bring you in, several name checks for Australia already. From your perspective, an Australian perspective then, so where do you see NABERS, which is where NABERS is more established, what have been the most significant impacts of the scheme, in your opinion? And can you share some of the metrics like higher occupancy and rent? So a bit of an Australian perspective, please, David.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So for a bit of a history look back, so it was 2010 when NABERS went from a voluntary framework to mandatory disclosure. So it's whatever, 15 years creating that step change within industry, because it is, as I say, it's mandatory across all the various different types of asset classes. And it really has led to a number of significant changes, and Antonette touched on a few, but some of them I might be repeating, but there's a 12% higher occupancy for offices with 5.5 and 6 stars. They're at 88% average compared to 4-star occupants, 4-star buildings, which have 76% occupancy. The next one then is that rent advantage that people point, and that all this data is from CBRE's Neighbourhood Watch report, and that's, I think, it's on our website. There's a 1 to 5% rent advantage, and we find that the rents tend to be 1 to 5% higher among the 5.5 and 6-star rated CBD office buildings. And within that report as well, there's also really strong correlation between asset values and premiums and discounts for the ratings. And the average cap rate for a 6-star rated building has a slightly higher premium than the average cap rate for a 4 to 4.5 star, which obviously have slight discounts. So it's a great scheme to create that kind of competitive advantage and deliver value.
Excellent, thank you, Dave. And yeah, I mean, proof's there in the numbers, occupancy and rents, and an uplift potentially. So that's all the business case you need to a great degree. So Luke, if I could bring you in now, please. So based on your work with clients, what challenges do owners and managers typically face when they're preparing for the NABERS energy rating, and how can they overcome them, please? Challenges and how to overcome them, Luke, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's probably worth pointing out, first of all, that operational ratings are not necessarily new, they're not entirely new for us in the UK. We've had display energy certificates since 2008 mandated for public sector buildings. So it's certainly something that we're quite well versed at here at CSR. But I think, yeah, there can be lessons learned to be brought over into the private rented sector. So I think the biggest problem is, data access. So it's really hard to get accurate utility data in the UK. So as you might be aware, we've got a fragmented source of data that is kind of managed through suppliers, meter operators, and data collectors. So there's currently no single mandated pathway to source that data. Where in Australia, that's a stark contrast. The data centralized. We've got energy retailers that are legally required to share data upon request. So really, I think the solution for that is twofold. Ultimately, I think in the long term, I would suggest that we need to push for a smart data legislation similar to that in Australia, and I do believe there is an outstanding consultation for that currently with the government. So it would be nice to see a positive response from the industry towards that. But in the short to medium and long term, I would suggest that using portfolio-wide monitoring tools to centralise those fragmented sources as a fix in the meantime. On top of that, we've got metering configuration. So I think due to the nature and complexity of the old building stock in the UK, we're finding that there's insufficient metering for things like NABERS. So at the very least, NABERS requires a coverage of landlord and tenant split. So I think, if that's not captured early on, then ratings can get delayed and potentially invalidated. So I would suggest that conducting a metering review early on and ensuring that your strategy aligns with the metering strategy aligns with NABERS rating type. That's really important. And then also tenant engagement. So certainly with whole building ratings, you need occupancy surveys, workstation counts, and rated hours. So I think we're finding that tenants are often reluctant or non-forthcoming with that because it's it can be heavily administrative task to get those from a multi-tenant building. So I think ultimately building relationships with your tenants and communicating the value of NABERS, and also aligning the rating type with your objective. So if you're marketing to an investor, then potentially opt for a base building ratings because that's the consumption that falls within landlord's control. So yeah, I think just generally, major data reform is required. That combined with aggregating data sources through monitoring tools, early metering validation, and strong tenant engagement. So if we can tackle those things, I think it can become much more smoother and more credible across the board.
Excellent. Thanks, Luke. Some nice context and clarification, strong call for data reform, and the challenges, the kind of things you're talking about, are the topic of our polls. So audience, do jump in. It's a multi-choice thing, and tick which challenge is most front of mind for you at present, please. So Antonette, if I could just bring you back in briefly here. From CIBSE's position administering NABERS in the region, I just wanted to ask you, Antonette, what gap is the scheme helping to fill in the UK building performance landscape? So if you could just put it in context there for us, please, Antonette.
Okay, as Luke mentioned now that UK is not new to energy certification schemes. We have few that one EPC is for building physics, and there is DEC for operational energy in public buildings, and we have BREEAM in use and GRESP, etc. It's all assess energy consumption. However, NABERS is quite different from all these schemes. It looks building energy consumption individually and analyze the operational energy use in terms of occupied area, hours of occupancy, and consumption. Also, weather is included within the benchmarks as a factor so that buildings that are in north could be still compared with the south. This is from my understanding of working with NABERS scheme that the NABERS rating is more influenced by how efficiently the office space is used by the occupants, and it's more about controls and measures and analyzing the operational data. What I mean is it's not just new buildings can get higher performance ratings. If they plan their office space by the occupants within the occupied time, and services are switched off within unoccupied spaces, etc., still they get higher rating in an old building too. We have lots of old buildings here, historic buildings. And also this scheme provides base building, tenant building, and whole building ratings. So that's different from all other existing measurements. So I think this helps. This is main difference from all other schemes, that it's individually targets each building to give a rating rather than looking at other options. It's purely
Excellent.
operational data. Yeah.
Thank you, Antonette. That's really useful. Some points of difference highlighted there so people can understand exactly where it fits within the existing and future landscape. So excellent. So now we're going to zoom in a bit and we're going to focus even more on performance, because obviously that's what a lot of the audience will be interested in. And we're looking at enhancing operational efficiency. And so I'm going to bring the panel back in again. Luke, quickly, if I come to you first. So obviously having worked across many buildings and clients, I'd just like to ask you, what operational strategies have you found most consistently successful in lifting energy efficiency in NABERS ratings? So what are your top tips for getting it right, Luke?
Yeah, I think given the fact that I have had experience working in Australia and in the UK, I've kind of had that exposure to what the culture is towards this type of optimization. And I think, largely in the UK, we're led by EPCs, which are, design intent, and that's kind of where it stops generally. Whereas in Australia, they have a culture of, designing for, operational performance and energy in use. So largely the points that I'd really focus on initially would be, first of all, HVAC. It's, up to in excess of 60%. So, you can design the best, the best systems in the world, but on paper, but often in practice, they'll perform poorly due to the energy drift in day-to-day management. So I think shifting that mindset, using monitoring-based optimization with features like equipment scoring league tables and thermal comfort scoring will allow us to shift our mindset from a static efficiency outlook to a dynamic performance validation outlook. So ultimately aiming to, for those systems to operate as per the original design intent and avoiding energy drift. So so that's generally, validating performance of HVAC in reality. So on top of that, there's controls. We're finding a lot of buildings are still using the original control strategies of the time of build. So the problem is that they're outdated control strategies with inefficient operation. You've got plant running out of hours, and you've got simultaneous heating and cooling unnecessarily. So I would suggest, regular fine tuning, seasonal commissioning, shifting HVAC equipment from fixed operation to demand control demand control operation, and ultimately driving energy demand reduction and better occupant comfort, which generally achieves a reduction in energy with no real need for major capex works. And then finally, maintenance. So traditionally, we rely on planned and unplanned reactive model. So I think really we as an industry, we need to shift that towards a more proactive, data-driven approach so that we can spot faults early, give FM teams actionable insights, and ultimately avoid compounding energy wastage, reducing equipment downtime, and ultimately promoting a culture of continuous improvement. So I think from my experience, those are the three main focus points that I would generally try and highlight as the main items that can lift and maintain NABERS energy ratings in real world practice.
Excellent, thank you, really useful. So good shout out for HVAC and controls, and of course it's always music to the budget holders' ears when you say things like no major capex, which everybody likes to hear, I guess. So Victoria, now if I could bring you in, thanks for joining us. So in Grosvenor's experience, I'd like to ask you, what measures have proven most effective improving energy performance across your portfolio? So what would you flag for us, please, Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, at Grosvenor, what we find helpful is actually to bucket our interventions into optimization, light retrofit, deep retrofit, and tenant engagement. So if I pick each of those in turn and just sort of share what we've done in each of those. But before we do any of those things, the most important critical thing we always do is we have a rolling program to install half-hour smart meters across our portfolio. So that's like fundamental in terms of data. For optimization, it's definitely the most efficient, quickest, least disruptive of all the interventions. And this is essentially basically making sure our buildings are running as efficiently as possible. So we do that by installing building analytic systems. And we found so many times plant running continuously that doesn't need to be running. And just by identifying that, we've seen reductions of around 25% of energy demand. Nice and easy and to do. For light retrofit, we focus on works that are the least disruptive to tenants, so it can do while the property's in occupation. So these are things like LED lighting upgrades and installing thermostats and automatic heating, cooling controls. And then deep retrofit tends to be about fabric upgrades. And as part of that, the most effective measures we found are upgrading windows and replacing gas heating with electric. And then finally, where we have little control to do the interventions ourselves, we try to engage with our tenants. And we found that we're most likely to be successful if we've already got a good landlord-tenant relationship, because they're not going to listen to our conversation if they've got complaints about their building being maintained or something's not working properly. So we need to have a good relationship with them. We need to have data to share with them. And we've also found it's most successful where they have an internal ESG lead.
Excellent, thanks. And nice points there, and a good point, essentially, that many of these benefits and sustainability improvements, if you like, it is a team game, and an adversarial attitude with the likes of tenants, everybody loses. So nice point on top of optimization and retrofit. So thank you. So David, so we're looking at the opportunities, but each time also we're looking at the challenges and the barriers. So David, if I could ask you to be glass half empty and talk about some of the common barriers that you see organisations facing when they're trying to lift or maintain their NABERS rating, and how do they overcome or tackle those? So David, please.
Yeah, and Jim, they touch on what Luke and various people have said. It's around incomplete and kind of poor quality data is always a challenge. You can get through that with, kind of good quality sub-metering and ensuring a better M&V validation process. Then the next thing is really inefficient equipment and controls, which also Luke touched on as well. So you have to move to a more proactive maintenance, and you can't really do that without the good data, right? So driving a data-driven maintenance, ensuring tuning and optimization. And then after that, it's around the team sport, right? It's not easy to optimize large, complex real estate assets. So you have to break down the operational silos and the barriers and ensure that there's kind of cross-functional collaboration. And that means, the owners to the facility management team, to the contractors, to consultants that are involved. But the good thing about that is a good underlying data source helps with all of that. Arguments are rife when the facts are scarce.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Thank you, David. And you've nicely segued for me into the next section. We're going to look at final takeaways and looking ahead. And I'm coming to Victoria first on very much on one of the points you just touched on. And Victoria, if I could ask you for some advice. What advice do you have for our audience on aligning these different functions such as operations, asset management, etc., to drive better sustainability outcomes? And can you please share one great example or any great examples from Grosvenor where this cross-functional collaboration has made a real difference, please, Victoria?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably maybe quite obvious to say, but it's all about having the right culture and a shared goal. So it's important to kind of start at the top and make sure that your company strategy incorporates sustainability so everyone is committed to the same goal. And at Grosvenor, we have a roadmap for every business unit. So the roadmap translates the overarching goals into practical targets by year, so everyone understands how they contribute to reducing carbon. And then we've also set up operational carbon working groups to ensure that our teams aren't working in silos, so we can share lessons across the units. And for our suppliers, we have a supply chain charter which sets out what we expect from them and make sure that we can work with suppliers who have the same sustainability values as us. We also run onboarding sessions for new suppliers, and we run mentoring programs for our SMEs. So in terms of examples, I think there's two key alignments we have at Grosvenor. The first is between asset management and our operations team, and then the second is between our operations team and our on-site team. So between asset management and operations, it's really important that for each building, the asset managers are sharing their future refurbishment plans with the operations team and letting them know when they're expecting a void period with enough warning so that the operations team can actually plan in their retrofit activities. And the asset managers also then need to communicate to the incoming tenants to make sure they know what to expect of their retrofitted unit. For example, an F&B tenant, if they're taking over a unit that has no gas supply, they need to know these. And then the second example is between our operations, facilities management team and on-site staff. So where we've installed these building analytics systems, team install it, but they need to make sure that our suppliers are reviewing that data regularly so that any interventions like control adjustments are actually made in a timely way. And also that our on-site teams know that those changes have been made in case they might affect tenant comfort. So then they're then on the front foot if they get any feedback from tenants.
Excellent, thank you. They're really good examples to illustrate, and in a way, it would be lovely if this communication and collaboration always just happened organically, but we know it doesn't. So as you pointed there do need to be strategies and systems in place so we have effectively planned serendipity in terms of people being on the same page. So thank you very much for those examples. So Antonette, if I bring it back to you for a moment now, and I know it's kind of touches on perhaps one of the questions we've got bouncing around. So looking ahead, Antonette, how do you actually see, I know you explained it's quite early days, but there's good buy-in at present. But how do you see NABERS evolving in the UK in the next few years? Plus, could you perhaps point to whether you expect expansion into other areas such as water or indoor environment or other building sectors? So give us a quick look at the roadmap ahead, please, Antonette.
Okay. We are looking at the next sector that could be added to the office sector now. However, it is going to take some time to do the background work and get the benchmarks right and put the training program in time, and also make the assessors to do all the trainings, etc. So it's going to take a while before we introduce the next sector. Of course, the expansion into water, indoor air quality and waste, etc. on the agenda too. But at the moment, we are more focusing on existing buildings, existing office buildings to pick up more. So all our time and effort are into bringing that scheme up to speed with design for performance. So that's where our concentration is at the moment. Of course, we are working on the background on the expansion, but it's going to be some time before we introduce that.
Excellent, thanks. That's useful to have some transparency around that. And with benchmarks and training, as you say, these things can't just be thrown together overnight. So best to consolidate and build in a good strategic manner. So Luke, if I can bring you in this section then. With the launch of the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standards, the UK CBS, which is not exactly an acronym that trips off the tongue, but with the standard, how do you see NABERS and that working together, please, Luke?
Yeah, I think they'll complement each other very well. I think ultimately the standard will define what net zero means for the built environment, everything from material sourcing, design, procurement, construction and operation. And I think NABERS, is a tool that could complement that operational element of that standard, so measuring actual operational performance. So I think, the standard will provide the framework and NABERS could provide the evidence for that element. So yeah, going forward, I think they could go hand in hand. Like I say, the standard will ensure that buildings are aligned with net zero pathways. And I think that NABERS can be that scorecard. I think ultimately we're going to need something to validate the operational performance of these buildings within that standard. So whether it's, a kilogram CO2 per meter squared metric, whatever that may be, I think it's a great tool to be able to validate that in practice. And together, I think, it'll give our owners, investors and tenants confidence that claims are credible. And further to that, I think, just like EPCs are today, we could expect NABERS embedded in due diligence valuations and disclosures potentially going forward. But I think it's also worth mentioning as well that I think NABERS was designed to, close that performance gap in the UK. And I think going off some of the stats that we've mentioned, that she mentioned earlier, I think we are seeing a ratio of 6-to-1 design for performance to actual energy in use. So we're still not seeing much follow through from the industry actually validating that design for performance at this point. So I would really like to see, you know, property owners, asset managers following through with that. But I'm not sure, unless they're forced to by the government, whether or not that will actually come through. So I think it's worth mentioning some policy backdrop here. I know you may or may not know, in 2019 there was a consultation where the government were considering mandating operational ratings for offices over 1,000 square meters, and I think NABERS, along with DEX and potentially an entirely new approach, were considered. 5-6 years on, we're still not ratified that consultation, which is concerning. But even since then, there's been talk about EPC reform, which has had a heavy focus on an operational metric. So I think that's set to come in mid-2026. So I guess we'll see, how that pans out. But I think the direction of travel is clear. I think operational energy accountability is coming to the centre of regulation, and I think NABERS could be a good tool to underpin that.
Excellent. Nice points made there, Luke. Thank you. So validation, credibility, and a nod for due diligence as well. So the serious stuff. So nice. We're moving into kind of the final quarter of our session now, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to David, as it were, because we have a few slides. We're going to look at the role of technology and review some of that for our audience before we move to the final close. So specifically, how that tech can help NABERS energy ratings improve. David, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So look, just wanted to make some points around Australia, and our own business is 12 years old, and obviously I mentioned NABERS was made mandatory 15 years ago, and we're really in a fortunate position. We have 385 buildings on our platform that all have valid and current NABERS ratings. So a ton of kind of deep experience in the journey of NABERS has gone through in Australia. So happy to kind of talk about the learnings and also to give specific examples. So it kind of, hopefully this all aligns, it does all align with everything that has been said so far around analyzing and kind of getting the right type of data and creating scenario analysis as the first stage to identify the kind of where you can optimize. Then the next thing is really executing and understanding the optimization strategies. So you can kind of set a goal and work towards it. And then I'll give you some examples of the journey certain buildings have gone on, and even right up to some of the largest portfolios that have NABERS rating across 60 plus buildings. So step one, it's all about baselining and benchmarking. So the important thing to do is really to look at the equipment performance, the various different sets of chillers, and really use technology to do that scenario analysis. It's really key to break down each area into how much benefit it can have to create the total amount of savings required to create a lift in your rating. So you might better see here like optimum schedules, economy control, boiler chiller lockouts. But what is the best practice? What's the total amount of equipment that's on site? And then what's the estimated energy savings available? And then using NABERS, you can reverse engineer the NABERS calculator. You can then quantify the impact that will have both on dollars, and then in turn you can bring it into actual analysis on the buffer you have before you drop a rating. And if you're targeting an increase in rating, then what is the actual energy percentage reduction required? And this is all stuff that's in our platform and stuff that we do for, as I say, hundreds of buildings. It's a team sport, as I said. It's all about getting the right types of data. It's all about getting the right type of engagement on the team. So it's with our own platform, what we install into buildings is we put a data acquisition device on the Ethernet network that all the existing plant and equipment communicates over. So it's another node on the network, just like a controller is a node or a BMS head end is a node. And from there, we're able to listen to tens of thousands of pieces of equipment data. So that's what speed is your fan, what position is your valve, what temperature is in the meeting room, what temperature is outside, lifts, lighting, foot traffic, all that information we can garnish without installing any additional hardware. We can also take any sub-metering data, and then we will, with the owners and a letter of authority, take in the utility data. So that's very important for that monitoring and verification element. Then after that, it's about assigning. On the right here, you have the root cause analysis of issues. One of the major challenges in the industry is nuisance alarms and alarm fatigue. Like, it just, unless software is actually helping the team on the ground, so they're the facility management team, they're the contractors, your mechanical, electrical, BMS contractor, unless you're actually giving them the root cause of where a problem is, then you're giving them more noise and you're just not helping. The key thing with, after you gather the data and then after you do very, very detailed analysis of that data, it's then how do people collaborate together on the platform? How can you assign actions? How can you take photos of things that are broken? Because this is not about getting maintenance teams to do anything for free. This is about getting the maintenance teams to getting more out of their planned maintenance contract. But then after that, every single building owner has a repairs and maintenance budget, and they want to fix things that are broken. So deploying that budget into areas that are outside of planned maintenance, it really helps the contractors. It helps the contractors in the sense that every contractor quite simply wants to get more work orders from a site that they're working on, but sometimes they struggle to find the root cause and struggle to find the things that are broken. Technology like ours bridges that gap. It says there is a valve on level 17, it failed, it needs to be fixed immediately, or it's going to waste £12,000 in chiller consumption over the coming year and potentially impact your neighbours' ratings. The other thing is reporting on the progress. It's just no good to get to gather data, to interrogate it, to create a workflow, unless owners can benchmark the performance of their assets and they can understand why an asset is underperforming, where is the performance gap, and how they can address that gap to lift the rating. So the technology component of this really knocks out this responding to an issue, right? So everybody has worked in an office is too hot or too cold. All hot and cold complaints, they also waste electricity or gas. But they also destroy the customer experience. So when they are reported to the facility management team, then there's an investigation process, and all of this time is where your neighbor's rating gets damaged. Whereas if you're able to move that to where there's billions of checks being performed by technology on the performance of your cooling towers, your chillers, your boilers, your AHUs, your FCUs, if all of those checks are happening all the time and they're then identifying the root cause of an issue, a person can be automatically dispatched and rectified it, and it can be repaired in a matter of hours, versus sometimes with the older traditional maintenance, sometimes things aren't found for a week, a month, and sometimes they're never found. And that's where, you know, tenants sometimes move out of buildings because of the poor comfort levels. But along with that, that's what really degrades the ratings. So there's some sets of examples, because that's what it's all about, right? It's one thing to talk about all this stuff, but how do you lift a rating from 3 to 5 stars? It took a 28% reduction. The challenge here was, like, again, a moving around of maintenance teams. There was outdated maintenance process, very little monitoring on site. But the beauty about getting an environmental rating optimized is you also will see optimization in the comfort levels. Some data points on it. So, like, there was 264 individual pieces of equipment. We were streaming nearly 400,000 data points per day off this asset with 182 zones. And the rules, these are what we call the expert system, and the AI expert system within our technology, because just like surgeons, medical practitioners, oncologists, they are using expert systems to improve their diagnosis. It's the same thing when you're an expert mechanical, electrical controls engineer. You want systems to augment your performance, to do the analysis for you and to point you in the right direction. And that's what helps consulting engineering firms scale with technology like ours. So this then is an example at scale, because this is one of our clients. They're an $84 billion real estate investment trust. And 71% of their properties have improved their neighbors' energy rating on our technology, 51% water improvement, and a 91% average thermal comfort score, which is really incredible. With this owner, when we started, they were hugely focused, as everyone is, and they continue to be, on reducing operational costs and utility costs. But when we started with them, 58% of their tenant complaints were air conditioning related. And we have that down to 7%, which is reflected in that 91% average thermal comfort score. So what is the benefit to the cost saving to less hot and cold complaints? We don't know, but the cost of a tenant complaining, someone being called out to investigate and going through that manual process is huge. We term it as an intangible, but it's something that really can be done away with. And NABERS is a fantastic chin-up bar to compare the performance of these buildings and to ensure that you're driving that continuous improvement across the assets. They're my slides, Jim. I'll stop sharing and hand it back.
Thank you very much, David. So that's taken us right through from at the top of the hour, we're talking about getting started, right through to the role of tech and NABERS as a chin-up bar. So we're now moving through to the last few minutes, if you like, final Q&A. So if you have got a question, now's the time to pop it in. And I should point out, it's the last minute or so of the poll. So if you haven't already voted, please do throw your vote in there, and then I'll try and have a quick look at the results in a moment. So whilst you're voting, I have a couple of questions here. Luke, I have a straightforward one for you, I think. It says, Luke, is there an analytics or FDD platform that you've been using with clients? Luke, please.
Yeah, very straightforward answer there. I think the technology that Dave's just shown you under the hood, we've in the UK, we've been using that on some of our existing clients. So I'd point that answer directly at CIM. They've got great tools there for you to implement for FDD across your portfolio.
Excellent, thanks. And one maybe perhaps a quick comment on that just from Antonette and Dave. Maybe have one asking, could NABERS become a regulatory requirement similar to EPCs and DCs? Antonette, first, just a quick opinion. Could you see it assuming that level of mandatory importance?
Okay, it's already Luke mentioned that NABERS was considered within the consultation in UK back in 5-6 years ago. It's and we don't have any response from the government yet, so we are still waiting. But the industry is not waiting for the government to give an answer that we are already on board, because it is a need for UK. So whether there is a regulation come on board or not, we are moving on with NABERS in UK.
Can I just add to that quickly, Jim?
Oh, go on, Luke, jump in.
Yeah. It's actually quite a funny story. We were at a networking event, and we collared a government minister whilst we were there. And when I say collared, I mean politely approached him in the buffet queue, and he suggested that the Boris Johnson at the time was about to pull the trigger on this, and due to some other political reasons, it would have put him in a less popular light. So they actually decided not to pull the trigger on that consultation, on implementing it and legislating it. So since then, it's been stood stagnant.
Okay, thanks. Good clarification. And just what I think the poll is about to close. We'll bring you the scores on the doors in a moment. Dave, I wonder if I could just bring you in for a quick final comment, really, on to what degree you'd like to see something like NABERS becoming mandatory as opposed to voluntary? And do you think sticks will really drive progress, or do you think the carrots that you described in terms of the uplift, etc., are sufficient?
Look, I often say it's a number of things. There has to be the stick, Jim. But it is this. What I've seen in Australia is the step change that government created when they made it mandatory, right? It forced people into operational efficiency. And they also, people might know, what the Australian government cleverly did as well is no government tenant could occupy any building that was anything less than 5 out of 6 stars. So that created a transformational change amongst the real estate investment trusts and the large owners. But there's the carrot, the stick, and then the tambourine, right? What has happened in Australia is it has really brought the industry together, and people are very collaborative because they all have to do it, right? And I think it's the case studies are very well celebrated. NABERS has gone from Australia to being adopted in New Zealand. And as I say, the methodology is now kind of making its way into the UK market. But there is such power in getting uniformity and getting it mandatory across the industry. It's not easy, but for the sophisticated owners, they get onto it straight away, and they can create that performance gap between people who kind of ignore it, and it does reward the early adopters and the mavericks. So I see nothing. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Nice nod for the tambourine there. So thank you. So we are bang on time, and so I'll bring you the poll results now. So thank you for all those who voted. It's around challenges. So I'll read in reverse order, if you like, the scores on the door. So the question we were asking in the poll was, what is your toughest challenge in preparing for or maintaining a NABERS energy rating? So what do the audience think would be the toughest challenge? And in 5th place, we had coordinating with asset managers and owners, which was that sort of collaboration piece we touched on. Then we had engaging the building operations teams. That was 24%. So basically 1 in 4 was saying that was the issue. Slightly higher, and not for once the primary challenge, cost and resources, coming in at 28%. Then into the top 2, and it was a pretty close run thing, but narrowly in 2nd place. And this maybe speaks to the fact that it's still early days. 39%, so that's nearly 4 out of 10, sort of said understanding the methodology is still a challenge. And I think that's a point worth noting there. So there is an education and a learning piece potentially, but most important, and really it's the word that kept popping up in just about every comment and presentation and question that we've had, it's collecting and validating energy data. 44% said collecting and validating energy data was the key challenge. So there you have it. That's a real snapshot state of play in terms of what the audience perceived to be the key challenges facing them for either preparing for or maintaining a NABERS energy rating. So thank you very much for voting. So finally, we are at the top of the hour now, at the end of the hour. So a couple of quick thoughts from me. So I would just mention time when the commercial property sector is coming under pressure, let's be honest, uncertainty around interest rates, inconsistency in back to work policies, perhaps, maybe concerns about the economy of tomorrow or energy costs of today. All of those things are putting a squeeze on, obviously, anything that might promise an uplift in occupancy, rents and asset value has to be worth a look. I mean, it's a real case of what not to like. Because it's a competitive marketplace, these kind of differentiators really matter. So the likes of standards and ratings matter. And importantly, of course, tech can help you seize that advantage and do so faster, crucially, because time can be a real winner for people. Right, so that's it then. We are 1 minute to go. In closing, big thank you to all our esteemed panelists for their insights. Antonette Easwaranathan, Victoria Herring and Luke Cleary, plus, of course, David Walsh and our hosts at CIM. To yourselves, our virtual audience out there joining at your desks on your screens today, and for your questions and your voting, thank you. As mentioned, you'll all get the recording after this, and please don't forget to complete that very short post-event survey. Really handy for us to keep optimizing exactly what you want to see and hear going forward. Forward to seeing you at the next session of the webinar series. Keep an eye on the CIM LinkedIn page and, of course, in your email inbox. Thank you very much, panel, for your great work. That's it for today. I've been Jim McClelland, editor at SUSMEAN. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Jim. Cheers for that.